The sky above Tren. 5 hung low and bruised, stained with the soot of fallen cities and the charred wreckage of orbital vessels. The once lush highlands of the Hydrothi colony world had been reduced to fractured plains of ash and bone, where the wind howled through the remnants of shattered towers and poisoned rivers. It was a graveyard now, silent but for the distant screams carried by the breeze and the crackling echo of energy fire in the distance. The Varn had arrived 8 months prior, and in less than 2 they had turned the tide of the war into a slaughter. Captain Reshk of the Hydrothi Vanguard watched through a fractured viewport, mandibles pressed tight in grim contemplation. His once proud defense garrison now numbered fewer than 6 dozen soldiers, most of them wounded or too young to have seen real battle. The Varn overwhelmed them with speed and brutality, hive-born nightmares with acid glands, bladed limbs, and no language but destruction. The Alliance had sent reinforcements, but they'd been fragmented, disorganized, and with every retreat, morale decayed. Behind him, Advisor Threx paced in nervous circles, his translucent robes stained with ash. "We've lost communication with Fort Talon. That was our last satellite uplink to the north." Resh's nod was slow, mechanical. "We're blind." "Worse," Threx hissed, voice barely restrained. "We're prey." It wasn't exaggeration. The Varn didn't merely conquer, they devoured. No terms, no mercy. Hive minds didn't negotiate. Reshk turned from the window, his scaled fingers tightening around the hilt of his sidearm. "How many civilians remain in the shelter?" "Just under 900, Threx replied. "If the lower levels hold, we may be able to keep them hidden for—" The comms console sparked to life. A garbled voice punched through static. It wasn't Hydrothi or any of the Alliance tongues. It was human. Cerberus unit inbound. Drop ETA, 27 seconds. Requesting immediate sitrep on zone designation Alpha Echo. Threx blinked in disbelief. "That's English." Reshk activated the console, toggling a translator. "This is Captain Reshk. I'm receiving your signal." "Who are you?" "Strike Team Cerberus, Earth Defense Forces. Mission parameters, containment, suppression, extraction. Standby." The line went dead. Before either of them could respond, the sky tore open. Fire streaked from orbit, not in a desperate escape pod, but in a coordinated assault pattern. Drop pods, sleek, black, and unmarked, punched into the ground like spears of judgment. 6 of them, perfectly spaced. The impact rattled the facility to its core. Reshk and Threx rushed to the southern viewport, barely reaching it before the first figure emerged. Armor like obsidian. Visors blank and unreadable. No insignia. The human moved with predatory grace, stepping from the smoking crater without hesitation, rifle already raised. Beside him padded a creature, quadrupedal, muscular, eyes glowing with faint blue light. A genetically enhanced warhound. 5 more followed. No ceremony. No introduction. Cerberus had arrived. Reshk moved to meet them at the outer gate, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "You're from Earth." The lead human gave a single nod. "Captain Cerberus 1. Strike operations." "You're Reshk." "I am." "Good. You'll brief us on site." Before Reshk could respond, the human passed him without another word. His team moved like phantoms, fanning out, checking angles, covering blind spots with practiced ease. The dog sniffed at the air, snarled once, and moved to the western breach. Reshk hurried to follow, struggling to match the human's pace. "We didn't request Earth assistance. We were told your world was neutral in." "You were losing," Cerberus 1 said, voice flat beneath the helmet. "That's the only reason we're here." Reshk bristled but said nothing. Because it was true. Threx intercepted them in the corridor. "Captain, the Varn are massing again." If they break the eastern barricade, we'll lose the tunnels. Cerberus didn't pause. Then we hold the eastern barricade. He turned toward his squad. Cerberus 2, with me. 3 and 4, northern flank. 5, dog, west tunnel. Roam pattern, suppressive ordnance. Minimal casualties, friendly or otherwise. The humans vanished down separate hallways, weapons gleaming in the dim light. Resch watched, still stunned. Your people. You don't ask questions? Cerberus 1 looked at him, visor reflecting the flickering lights overhead. We don't ask when it's time to kill monsters. They reached the eastern barricade within moments. The last line of defense before the civilian shelters. Dozens of makeshift turrets were still cooling from the last engagement, and Hydrothi soldiers, barely out of adolescence, stood trembling behind sandbag walls. A low rumble shuddered through the ground. They were coming again. Resch instinctively reached for his comms, issuing reinforcement requests that would never be answered. Cerberus 1 stepped forward instead, silent as always, and scanned the corridor ahead. Then the Varn came, dozens of them, shrieking and clawing their way through the rubble. Acid glands vented steam as they skittered and bounded forward. One leaped across the gap and was cut from the air by a single rifle burst from the human's weapon. The others didn't slow, but neither did the humans. Cerberus 1 advanced, firing in measured bursts, each shot deliberate and lethal. The dog moved beside him, jaws closing around a Varn's throat with mechanical precision. At the same time, Cerberus 2 deployed an autocannon, the hum of its spin drowning out the screeches of dying aliens. Resch had seen many battles, but nothing like this. These weren't desperate defenders or glory-seeking warriors. They were executioners, unflinching, efficient, inhuman. When the last Varn fell, the corridor fell silent once more. One of the Hydrothi children, no older than 10, peered from behind a barricade. Are they gone? Cerberus 1 knelt, lifted his visor. The child stared at his scarred, weary face. You're human? He nodded once. Are you going to save us? No, he said quietly. I'm going to make sure they can't hurt you again. Behind them, the fires burned. But there was something new in the air now. Not hope, not yet, but fear. And for the first time, it wasn't coming from the defenders. It was coming from the Varn. Mud clung to every inch of Scout Lieutenant Resch's limbs as he pressed himself flat against the ruined slope, for eyes fixed on the field below. His gill sacks flared with each breath, trying in vain to filter the thick smoke and dust from the air. Tren 5's air was heavy with death and carbon. What remained of the 7th Alliance front watched from hiding, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or a new form of extinction. The humans were unlike anything Resch had ever seen. Even now, as their silhouettes moved through the war-torn valley, he found himself struggling to connect them to any known concept of soldiering. They didn't march. They didn't chant. They simply hunted. He tracked one through a scope, tall, broad, dressed in armor like obsidian bone. Every movement was deliberate. The soldier paused beside a ruined artillery cart, raising his rifle with the calm of a predator at the top of the food chain. A Varn drone scuttled from cover. 3 precise bursts later, it was a smear of broken chitin and leaking acid. There was no celebration, no pause. The human moved on. Resch shifted his position, heart pounding in quiet awe. He had been trained in 20 different forms of combat awareness. He had studied over 100 species' methods of warfare. None of that applied here. These humans didn't follow established doctrine. They made their own. The one they called Cerberus 1 was leading the incursion team. No name, no visible rank, but every human deferred to him. His helmet had a jagged crack across the visor, revealing half a face smeared with Varn blood. Cold, unshaking eyes surveyed the battlefield like a machine. And yet, Resch saw something there, beneath the efficiency, beneath the silence. A deep, old fury. Not blind rage. Purposeful wrath. Another Varn pack emerged from the eastern ridge. 20 strong. Armored cast. They moved in perfect coordination, mandibles clicking in unison. Seconds later, 2 human units responded. Not with overwhelming firepower, but with surgical precision. One team flanked left, drawing the Varn forward, while the other breached through the rubble, executing from behind. It was not battle. It was dissection. And then came the moment Resch would never forget. Cerberus 1 broke formation and ran straight into the Varn, a sidearm in one hand and a serrated blade in the other. It wasn't a calculated risk, it was controlled aggression. He shot one Varn through the eye, spun beneath another's claw, and drove the blade upward into its throat. His dog, a massive German shepherd with amber eyes, moved in sync, mauling a third before retreating to cover. The human fought like war was his native language. Aki, the Hydrothi medic, whispered through the comms, "They don't fight for survival." Threx responded flatly, "No, they fight to win." Back on the ridge, Resch caught glimpses of other humans moving through the ruined buildings, marking targets with laser pulses, calling down artillery strikes with a flick of the wrist. There was coordination, but also instinct. As if they didn't just train for war, they understood it. At one point, Resch's HUD lit up with a warning. A Varn elite detachment was approaching from the rear. Standard protocol would demand a defensive withdrawal, but the humans had no intention of retreating. Cerberus 1 spoke 3 words into his squad channel. Words intercepted on open frequency. "Trap the bastards." Explosions tore through the alleyways. Hidden charges pre-placed with uncanny foresight vaporized half the Varn detachment. The remainder fled. Not regrouped, fled. The battlefield quieted. Smoke curled in lazy columns. Resch lowered his scope and rose cautiously, transfixed by the aftermath. The Alliance had struggled for months to hold this position. The humans had taken it back in under an hour. He heard boots behind him and turned sharply, only to find Aki climbing up the ridge. Her breath labored. "They're moving again," she said, adjusting the strap on her med pack. "Toward the southern corridor. There's another Varn nest there. They don't rest." She shook her head. "I don't think they believe in rest." Resch hesitated before asking, "What are they?" Aki paused, watching the human units as they disappeared into the darkening horizon. "The end," she said. He didn't argue. Below, in the aftermath, Cerberus 1 stood at the center of the ruined stronghold, speaking with no one. His armor was battered, smeared with Varn ichor and dirt, but he moved as though untouched. The dog sat beside him, tail flicking calmly, watching the field. Threx approached him cautiously, alone. Alliance protocols usually demanded formal diplomatic greeting, but the moment called for something more primal. He stopped a few paces away. "Your intervention was effective," Threx said. The human removed his helmet, revealing sharp features, deep eyes, and a scar that ran from temple to jaw. He was young, surprisingly so, but with the gaze of someone who had lived a dozen wars already. "We don't intervene," he said. "We eliminate." Threx studied him. "You could have let us die." "We almost did." Silence hung between them. Finally, Threx asked, "Why now?" Cerberus 1 looked past him, toward the sky, toward Earth perhaps. "Because now, someone's paying attention." He turned and walked away, joining his unit without another word. The conversation was over. No alliance treaty, no ceremony. Only the mission. Later, that night, Resch recorded his field log. They don't speak often. They don't celebrate. They bring no banners, and they seek no gratitude. But they do not hesitate. They do not falter. The Varn, who slaughtered billions without blinking, retreat from them. I watched a human run into a swarm with a blade and a dog and come out alone and victorious. They are not soldiers. They are storms wearing skin. And I believe the war just changed. As the scout ended his log, gunfire echoed faintly in the distance. The humans had already reached the southern nest. No one had given the order. They didn't need one. They knew what needed to be done. The southern corridor had once been a flourishing Cerati research district, its crystalline towers gleaming with bioluminescent light. Now those same towers lay shattered and blackened, their elegant spires melted into grotesque shapes by sustained Varn acid bombardment. Among the twisted ruins, human soldiers moved like phantoms, silent, precise, and deadly. Corporal Marin Ives knelt beside a fractured data core, her gauntlet gently brushing away ash and debris. The machine was long dead, its organic circuitry crusted with dried fluids, but she was searching for something else, signs of movement. She tapped in her HUD and tagged heat traces barely distinguishable from the environmental noise. She spoke through the squad comms, her voice flat. Confirmed biosigns, small cluster, 15 meters northwest. Likely civilians or wounded allies. Sergeant Keene responded immediately. Move to extract. Standard overwatch. Cerberus 1 is sweeping the northern flank. Ives nodded and rose, rifle raised. Her squad followed, a four-man team fanning out with the ease of long practice. Their armor didn't clink or whine. Everything about them was engineered for stealth and lethality. They found the survivors huddled in the remains of a collapsed med lab. 3 Cerati scientists, their skin dulled with trauma, and a child, a juvenile hydrothy with a shattered breathing sac and a glazed stare. Ives immediately knelt beside the child and activated her oxygen seal mask, pressing it gently over the tendrils. Easy now, she said quietly, switching to the hydrothy dialect. Breathe slow. The child blinked, and for a moment, recognition flickered in his gaze. Then the scream began, soft, wet, terrified. It wasn't directed at her. It was at something behind her. I've spun just in time to see the shadow leap from the rubble. A Varn warrior, emaciated but still lethal, launched itself toward her. She ducked, pivoted on her heel, and fired 3 rounds directly into its thorax. It kept coming, claws swinging. Before she could react again, it was torn in half mid-air, shot from behind by a clean burst from an energy rifle. Cerberus 1 stepped into view, smoke curling from his barrel. Clear, he said, scanning the ridge above for more threats. Ives exhaled slowly. Appreciated. He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched beside the Cerati scientists, who stared at him with a mixture of wonder and dread. Any of you combat trained? He asked. They shook their heads. He looked at Ives. Evac route is compromised. You'll hold here until we clear the south tunnels. Yes, sir. He didn't wait for gratitude or questions. He was already moving again. Back at Central Command, which now operated from the remnants of a gutted transport carrier, General Threx stood in what passed for a war room, reviewing the latest tactical overlays. The Alliance's remaining units had begun reactivating along the front. Inspired, perhaps, or simply following the momentum the humans had ignited. The Varn nest in the southern district was vast, deeper than scans had predicted, stretching through subterranean catacombs and former mining tunnels. No conventional strike could collapse it without endangering the surface. Threx's advisors debated strategies, but none of them spoke with real conviction. Then Cerberus 1 entered. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't acknowledge Threx's guards or the armed Vekari who flinched as he passed. He placed a small device on the central table and activated a 3D render of the tunnels below. This is your nest, he said. It spans 9 levels. They're growing another queen. Threx approached slowly. How did you? Recon drones. Buried 27 of them since touchdown. We've mapped the hive. And your plan? Deep insertion. No bombardment. We go in, we kill the queen, we rig the core, we get out. Frex's mandibles clicked in surprise. That's suicide. The human's eyes didn't blink. It's Tuesday. No one laughed. Reshk, now serving as alliance liaison to Cerberus unit, leaned closer. How many of your people will you send? 10. Frex stared at him. You'll send 10 soldiers into a fully populated Varn hive. Cerberus 1's tone didn't change. We've done worse with 5. The room fell silent. And then, as if the decision had never been in doubt, Threx gave a slow, solemn nod. What do you need from us? Stay out of the way. The insertion began before dawn. Cerberus 1 led the breach team, 10 in total, each one clad in reinforced exo-armor, each carrying equipment designed for subterranean warfare. Ives was among them, her rifle magnetically locked to her back as she descended into the chasm after her CO. The tunnel stank of acid and old blood. The walls pulsed with faint bioluminescence, organic residue left behind by Varn hatchlings. At intervals, they passed shredded remains of previous Alliance squads, long since devoured or converted into nutrient stockpiles. No one spoke. When they reached level 6, the first resistance appeared. A tide of Varns surged from the shadows, screeching and thrashing, claws scraping against armor. But the humans didn't break formation. They responded with blistering fire, coordinated arcs, and overlapping cover. When one of them was knocked to the ground, 2 others dragged him behind a barricade of rubble while the squad's auto-turret bought time with a wall of suppressive fire. Cerberus 1 drove forward like a force of nature, his dog at his heel, flanking the horde and planting detonation charges as he moved. Don't stop, he barked over comms. Keep the line moving. By level 8, they had lost 1 man, Private Garza, impaled through the abdomen by a Varn stalker. He died silently, his last action arming his incendiary pack to take 3 of the enemy with him. At level 9, they found the queen. She was massive, her chitin layered like obsidian armor, her body half fused into the living nest. Thousands of eggs clustered around her, pulsing with unborn spawn. Her shriek echoed through the tunnels, and the hive awoke fully. Cerberus 1 didn't hesitate. He opened fire, and the squad followed. They fought not for victory, but for finality. Mare and Ives darted between cover, lobbing EMP grenades into the egg clusters, frying the embryonic horrors within. The queen lashed out with psychic fury, stunning 2 of their team, but Cerberus 1 drove his blade into her crown while his dog tore through her thoracic limbs. When it was done, they stood in a chamber of silence and ruin. Cerberus 1 activated the core charges. This place dies now. Extraction? Ives asked, panting, wounded. Not an option. We go vertical. Blast path. He pointed up to the ceiling above the queen's chamber, already webbed with cracks from the detonations. They climbed. Explosions rippled through the hive as they ascended. Fire and earth collapsed in on themselves. The queen's scream faded beneath tons of rock. And then daylight, blinding and pure. They broke the surface seconds before the last charge vaporized the nest behind them. Reshk watched it all from the command ridge, eyes wide as the earth heaved and the smoke belched skyward. They had done it. 10 went in. 9 came out. Cerberus 1 stood among the smoke, breathing hard, face streaked with soot and blood. His armor was cracked, his dog limping. But he was still standing. The war wasn't won. But something fundamental had shifted. The Alliance wasn't alone anymore. And the Varn were learning to fear. Night fell like a shroud over Tren 5, cloaking the battered surface in cold and silence. Fires smoldered in the husks of ruined buildings, But for the first time in weeks, there was no gunfire, no screaming, only the wind and the quiet hum of alliance units tending to the wounded. Somewhere in the east, the stars were visible again through a thinning veil of smoke. It felt, to some, like the world itself was exhaling. Cerberus 1 stood alone on a high ridge overlooking the southern crater. The remnants of the Varn hive were buried beneath layers of collapsed earth and ferrocrete, the ground still warm from the detonations. He didn't speak. His helmet rested under one arm. His eyes, bloodshot, distant, tracked the horizon with the vigilance of a man who had forgotten how to rest. His dog, bleeding from a wound across its haunch, lay at his feet, gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the valley. It didn't whimper. It just watched, waiting for the next fight. Below, in the Alliance command shelter, Threx reviewed the post-assault data. The numbers were almost absurd. Minimal human casualties. Total Varn hive neutralization. Recovery of civilian survivors. For any other species, such an operation would have been a desperate gamble. For the humans, it had been, somehow, expected. He turned toward Reshk, who stood quietly by the entrance, scanning footage from the squad's helmet feeds. Cerberus's final charge. The Queen's death. The vertical escape. They shouldn't have survived that, Threx muttered. No, Reshk agreed. But they did. Again. What drives them? Reshk hesitated. Rage. Memory. I don't know. But it's not just about victory. It's about making sure their enemies never try again. Threx folded his arms. That's not how we fought this war. It's how we survive the next one. Cerberus's squad, battered and burned, had refused evacuation. They stayed on the ground, repairing defenses, rebuilding fortifications, offering no explanation for their refusal. I've worked alongside Hydrothi engineers, her arm in a sling. Sergeant Keene organized supply drops. Even a dog had taken post near the outer perimeter, teeth bared at anything that moved. None of them sought praise. None expected gratitude. They simply worked as if the war never ended, only shifted. That night, Reshk approached Cerberus 1 directly. He found him beside a shattered walker husk, adjusting his rifle scope with methodical care. The man didn't look up. You wanted a war, Reshk said. Cerberus didn't answer. You got one, the scout added. Finally, the human responded. No, you had a war. We brought an ending. Reshk stepped closer, tilting his head. You don't believe in peace? Peace is temporary. Fear lasts. Is that how you win? Cerberus finally looked at him. That's how we survive. Reshk felt the weight of the words settle over him. The man before him wasn't just a warrior. He was an embodiment of Earth's scars, of a culture that had long since lost its innocence. They didn't send diplomats or ambassadors. They sent hammers. Your people weren't always like this, Reshk said quietly. No, Cerberus agreed. We were softer, naive, but that didn't work. The universe taught us its lessons. Now we teach them back. Across the field, smoke curled around a newly raised Alliance banner. The insignia of a unified force. Dozens of species under a single cause fluttered in the breeze. A symbol of resistance, of hope. But Reshk saw now that hope had teeth. Later, a message arrived from Central Alliance Command. Acknowledgement of the operation's success. Authorization for deeper collaboration with Earth's military divisions. Formal requests for expanded training protocols, weapon sharing, joint operations. It was everything Cerberus's team had avoided, and everything their presence had guaranteed. Threx read the final line aloud to Reshk, requesting formal designation of Earth forces as permanent Alliance strike element. Reshk nodded. They'll stay then. Threx hesitated. Do we want them to? Neither answered that question. In the days that followed, something strange began to happen. The other Alliance units, the Vekari, the Hydrothi, even the passive cow, started mimicking the humans. They adjusted formations, adopted tighter flanking maneuvers, stopped retreating so easily. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. Fear wasn't just moving through the Varn. It was flowing through their enemies too, tempered into focus, into discipline. One morning, Reshka woke to find that the Varn were gone. No skirmishes, no recon drones, total withdrawal. It wasn't a strategic regrouping. It was a retreat. He asked Eyes about it over shared rations beside the command fire. They finally figured out, she said. They know what we are now. And what's that? She smiled, tired and bitter. The reason they lose. The alliance began regaining ground. Not through superior numbers, but through renewed aggression. Each time the humans joined a front, the Varn buckled. Entire hive systems collapsed. Word spread across the fringe sectors. The humans were on the march. Cerberus I refused every medal, declined every commendation. He continued fighting, always with the same intensity, the same silence. His dog by his side, his war never ending. Reshk recorded a final log before departing Tran 5. They did not come for diplomacy. They did not arrive with speeches or banners. They came like storms, merciless, deliberate, and unstoppable. The war was lost, and then they arrived. We thought we knew warfare. We did not. We thought we understood resilience. We did not. Humanity did not save us through compassion. They saved us because they refused to lose. He paused, then added quietly, I do not know if the galaxy will ever be ready for what they are, but I'm glad they are on our side. As the last troop carriers left the surface, the sky above Tren 5 began to clear. Sunlight, warm and sharp, broke through for the first time in months. Cerberus I stood on the edge of the eastern ridge, watching the horizon. There were more hives to destroy, more wars to end. He didn't know rest, only purpose. And somewhere in the stars, the Varn were running. Not regrouping, running. Because Earth had arrived, and it had brought soldiers.